It's the best intro on YouTube. Yeah. Good evening, folks. Welcome back to the weekly Armchair Sports Talk. It's the weekly Steelchair podcast. Another episode with me, your host, Reece, Devils Rising from Twitter. Featuring me tonight is my guest, Callum from All For United. Yes, you heard that right. It is All For United. I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, mate. Excited. A little bit different. Feel like I found my calling a little bit, if I'm honest.
Well, all we can say is the more the merrier, the more entertainment, the better the show. So tonight's episode, there's only one topic really, and of course, I'm always prepared.
The rivalry that shaped wrestling, I guess you could say, couldn't you?
Absolutely. Nothing better. Rock versus Austin. May as well jump in and ask a very obvious question. What was your overall view and perspective of that rivalry, considering what it had in terms of effect on pro wrestling, especially from a fan base?
I mean, to be fair, it was around the time, really. Obviously, it was kind of the bulk of the Attitude Era. It was something that was so important to wrestling at the time. You could go as far as saying it was kind of era defining. You know, a lot of people, when you speak about that era, the Attitude Era, you'd speak of McMahon and Stone Cold and The Rock and Undertaker and Mankind and Triple H, DX. But the thing that a lot of people will probably say first is The Rock and Stone Cold. It was the kind of thing that probably propelled the pair of them to ultimately stardom outside of wrestling, and it's what a lot of us wrestling fans kind of think. You know, it was something that a lot of us hold so many dear memories of, and even now today on the WWE network, on YouTube, on other very legitimate means of streaming, you know, The Rock and Stone Cold is the first thing that you think of when you think of the WWE and wrestling as a whole. You know, for people maybe 10, 20 years older than myself and you as well, some people think of Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant and the Body Slam. Some people will go back to The Rock and Stone Cold and start thinking about, you know, the rock bottom and the people's elbow and the way that The Rock sold the stunner and, you know, how much better he did it than so many others. It's something that so many people will remember and so fondly as well. And it's probably what made so many people fall in love with wrestling.
Got to ask a question because you mentioned selling the stunner. Who sold it better, in your opinion, The Rock or Scott Hall?
Oh, I have to say The Rock. I think the way you could kind of tell he was going to Hollywood every single time he was doing the selling of that move, couldn't you? I thought it was kind of different every time he took a stunner, wasn't it? You never knew what was going to happen. It was a move that if you did it in the schoolyard, it was never going to hurt you. But The Rock made you believe it actually stunned you and kind of sort of made you lose your mind for a little bit of a match. Really, it was amazing what The Rock could do against Stone Cold. Really,
especially when you look at him. I've always watched interviews back between the two of them. They always spoke about their rivalry, and they spoke about what you mentioned about them propelling them to further success. Obviously, The Rock credits the WWE for where he is now, but he also credits Stone Cold for giving him a platform to be himself, be more of an Attitude, because obviously Stone Cold changed the face of that. He gave Attitude a purpose. We all remember, well, I was a little bit young at the time, but obviously I've watched it back because The Rock's my GOAT. The Rock's debut at Survivor Series 1996, he was the most blue chipper, smiling, boring character you can find, other than the Brooklyn Brawler. And then fast forward a year, he's in the Nation of Domination. He's talking about himself in the third person. He's dissing Farouk, the first black world champion, like in history. And then you've got Stone Cold, who's stunning Vince McMahon on a regular basis and telling Bret Hart what he thinks of Canadians and all that. So it's great how they transcend themselves because of their close connection.
Yeah, I mean, forgive me for the expression, but the pair of them just rubbed off, you know, on each other so well. And I know, obviously, we obviously know the world of wrestling is scripted and it's choreographed and things, but as a young person watching wrestling, it made you forget. You genuinely believed they hated each other. You genuinely were watching to think who was going to win this week, who was going to get the upper hand. And I think that kind of storytelling is something that's quite unknown to so many people outside of wrestling. You know, and so many people watch soap operas or movies or whatever, and you kind of you either root for the bad guy or the good guy or whoever, and it kind of looks so frowned upon when it comes to wrestling. And I mean, I'll admit myself, like I still follow wrestling to a point, but my friends who half did grow up watching it, they completely fell out of love with it. They completely thought, "Oh my god, what's the point in this?" But it's obviously nowhere near the same nowadays, of course, for so many different reasons, and that's a whole debate in itself. But it made you want to watch it because it made you want to see what was going to happen next across so many storylines across the Attitude Era, and the epitome of that was the Rock and Stone Cold. And you know, like you just said in interviews, then you know, back then you believed they hated each other, but you look at it now and you think, and you see interviews of them and the pair of them getting emotional and even speak about it because it's quite obvious what it meant to them both and how unbelievable and how high the stock grows every time them two were in a ring together. Yeah, but I mean, my favourite moment of them together was, you know, the Royal Rumbles and the way Stone Cold always thought. You know, I think it was the '98 Rumble, I believe, where you know Stone Cold thought he won. The Rock rolled back in, and straight away Stone Cold stunned him, and out he went. It was to me that was one of his best sells of a stunner because it completely knocked him out, so to speak, and he threw him straight over the top rope. It was just such a, oh no, he's not going to win now, and Stone Cold just went, oh, you didn't go over, all right, I'll put you over now. It was so perfect, and there's so many things to the pair of them. You know, you said then the Rock's your goat. There's probably so many just because of what he did for, you know, in terms of his heritage and where he's came from and what he's then led to the future of WWE with, you know, Roman Reigns nowadays, Nia Jax. Obviously, I know she's not there anymore, but he is kind of the catalyst of kind of what happens to WWE over the next 25 years and is the catalyst of what they'll probably do going forward for the next 25 years. And you can throw Stone Cold into that, you throw The Undertaker into that. I mean, personally, Undertaker was my all-time favourite just because of what he made you believe as a character.
I think he's the greatest ever, like The Undertaker. I think he's the greatest character ever. I think Shawn Michaels is the best in-ring performer, but for me, just my overall favourite just growing up was The Rock. It was hard to really pinpoint why, because obviously every time I was in school, I was always like, I wasn't giving people the finger because obviously it was the obvious way to get attention. But if somebody pissed me off, I'd always tell them I'm gonna kick their candy ass. So it was always fun. So like raising people's eyebrows, like I enjoyed doing that in high school. I used to wrestle like my best pal, like no joke. My best pal used to wrestle every weekend, like on his trampoline. So we used to do like full blown matches. He was not only was a Mick Foley fan, he was also a Steve Austin fan. So we would literally just recreate matches. So we recreated from start to finish that WrestleMania 17 match on a trampoline, just completely from start to finish. Obviously, we couldn't get interference, but we reenacted a version of a chair shot because obviously, if he hit me with his wooden chair, I would have had a broken back. But
yeah,
it was just pure entertainment.
Yeah, I mean, I still remember when I was young. Believe it or not, I'm under 25, so I kind of watched the Attitude Era after it happened. I kind of more grew up on the Ruthless Aggression era, so to speak, you know, with Eddie Guerrero and the rise of John Cena and Evolution and things. So
yeah,
I had to go back on you know, YouTube, old DVDs, videotapes, believe it or not, all that kind of thing. And that's how I kind of went, oh my God, that was such a defining era in the WWE, because let's not forget, WCW was touted to win for a very long time. And obviously the Mick Foley Mankind WWE run, kind of WWF title win, kind of flipped it on its head. And this is what I mean. It was just, I remember being young, like you say. I watched on YouTube trampoline wrestling. You couldn't get enough of it. I thought some of the things you could see on there was unbelievable. You weren't a wrestling fan, I don't think, if you didn't enact the promos in your living room and go on a trampoline and do the moves, and it was a weirdly fun thing to do, even though it bloody hurt when you did it sometimes.
Oh yeah, I nearly broke my back once trying to do a sunset flip powerbomb. Like but to be fair, I'd still do it.
I tried to, yeah. I mean, my one of my favourites was I love Jeff Hardy, and I could never protect his swanton bomb because the way he lands is almost like halfway between his neck and his back. So yeah, it was really odd. Really odd. I remember doing it once and very, very nearly had to go to A&E because I very nearly hurt myself. Luckily, I was kind of out of action for a little bit, I guess, as an 8-year-old.
I think it's just the madness that you get from it as well. That always stands to mind. Like for me, I was lucky at the time where I was seeing the Attitude Era as I was getting into like 2000, so I was lucky at that time. I was watching every week at that age. Like I was lucky, but obviously the Ruthless Aggression was when I was slightly more like 7, 8 years old. But 3 or 4 year old still watching wrestling. My granddad every weekend because we were watching Heat, and then obviously Experience at the time, like old vintage Experience on Sky One.
On Sunday morning, yeah, I remember.
Yeah, you used to get all that.
Isn't it?
Used to get all that. So if I watched Raw, it was rare. Like it was rare if I got to watch Raw at that time. Obviously, there was no SmackDown yet, but that was about to appear. But the one thing I always remembered that stands out is one particular segment between The Rock and Steve Austin, and that was the funeral. Steve Austin's funeral leading up to Backlash.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many moments you can even think about, though, isn't there? Like, obviously, the moment that'll always stand, I think, in every wrestling fan's head was the beer truck. Just the rocks on the mic, just speak, and the Stone Cold's just not listening to him. He doesn't give a shit what he's saying, and he just sprays them all and gets them. It was brilliant. It was something that, to me, that was one of the greatest segments ever in wrestling history. I think, and it was so funny, but it was kind of it defined attitude, didn't it? Because he just wasn't listening to him at all. He was like, I don't care what you're saying. Speak to the fans for a minute. Keep them all entertained, but in a minute we're going to go at it, but I'm going to give a moment for everyone to remember. It's something so amazing, and this is where you kind of come to the modern era, though. Is so many people compare to those two. Like when CM Punk was there, everyone wanted the CM Punk Stone Cold thing because it was some kind of comparison about their attitudes. Obviously, it was kind of polar opposites, but it was kind of fuck the man kind of thing. It was. Everyone today is always compared to those two, I feel.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like they were such a catalyst in terms of where wrestling is today. And whenever either of them come back, you can see how appreciated they are. It's like I say, the moment where Stone Cold comes out in the beer truck, it had you hooked. It was kind of the thing where you thought, what's he going to do with that? Like, why would you drive out in that? What's the point in it? Because at first you kind of were like, what is it? What's he doing? And you just thought he was driving out, cool entrance. He was going to go in the ring, do a promo. That was it. And then he doesn't. He just sprays them, and then they go at it. It's mental. It was something like even at that point, it was something we'd never heard of. It's kind of that thing. It pushed the boundaries so much, and obviously nowadays a lot of the stuff that happened in the Attitude Era would never get passed through, but. It was kind of back then. It was so fun and so funny to watch, and all the different parts of the segments of the show went together so well to just create such mesmerizing TV. And even in highlight reels, and even today on YouTube or the network, even now it makes you want to go on and rewatch it all. It was so good, and it kind of in a weird way, it makes me feel a little bit sad sometimes because. As different as wrestling is today, and as maybe obviously it's a new generation growing up now, I never really see that kind of segment sometimes. Maybe it's because you don't realise it at the time, or even realise it now, and in 10 years' time you'll be like, oh, wow, that was good. I underappreciated it at the time.
Yeah.
But it does make me feel sad because, like we were mentioning in the Ruthless Aggression era, you remember so much of it. And you mentioned The Rock before, Reece, like, how when he first started, he was kind of smiling chipper dude who just ran out of Survivor Series, did his thing, and then a year later became amazing. But I kind of compare that in a weird kind of way to John Cena. John Cena was really struggling at the start. He had that amazing match with Kurt Angle. He had all that great stuff with, the Undertaker shaking his hand and everyone coming
Chris
up to him
Jericho as well. His first pay-per-view
Yeah,
match with Jericho. Yeah,
well, that's what I mean. And he was tipped, but a good year or so later, he was forgotten about. He was doing tag team matches on house shows. And then luckily he found this kind of rhythm that, I mean, the story is brilliant. And maybe get into it later, but it whether The Rock and John Cena have those parallels, which probably led to them having that match. And it breaks my heart that, because Stone Cold would have been amazing at something like that. Obviously, Stone Cold went away and had his little success in Hollywood, but nowhere near to the comparison of The Rock. And I feel like with Stone Cold's injuries, it really did rob us of some further moments a couple of years down the line where, with the dream matches that we could have had with so many different people.
Because I look at you mentioned injuries, and obviously the one that stands out, unfortunately, is the Owen Hart injury at SummerSlam, which was a complete freak accident. And he broke his neck, and that led to further development of his character from the King of the Ring a year before, when he gave birth to Austin 316 says, "I'll whip your ass." Obviously, SummerSlam
before, actually.
It was just a great moment. Obviously, the SummerSlam match was a year later, and you saw that, and then I think the best thing about that is how well he was getting over, because he was ripping Sergeant Slaughter every week whilst The Rock was building himself up within the nation. Steve Austin was taking the piss out of Sergeant Slaughter. The first stunner to Vince McMahon was when Vince was a commentator, telling him he needs to get cleared before he can wrestle. And he's like, "I'll forfeit the belt to you as long as I get my damn rematch." Well, and inadvertently, he gave the title to Owen Hart just so he can kick his ass in Canada.
Yeah, so, I mean, it was crazy, wasn't it? And the thing is, the meteoric rises of both of them kind of just coincided with each other to kind of hit at the top. And it's like I said before at the start of the show, they were quite literally the catalyst, weren't they, at that time? And there was so much that they did in general for wrestling, never mind just the WWE. And it was just such a fun watch. And then obviously, I mean, the 316 moment, mate, was the best thing I've ever seen. Like, it's still celebrated now. I'm, March 16th every year. Happy Steve Austin Day, innit? You know what I mean? Happy Stone Cold. You still remember it. He still puts it on his social media platforms even now. You know what I mean? And I can guarantee it was 25 years ago, actually, this year.
The Rock was 25 years. The Rock was 25 years debut as well this year.
Was not that long ago as well, wasn't it? So it's just something that was probably at the time never even considered. Similar to the Undertaker streak or whatever when it first started. It wouldn't have even been considered that 25 years later. It was probably just a random promo that he did and thought, "Oh yeah, I'll get everyone to keep their eyes on me." And now it's so celebrated. Something that modern day wrestlers should inspire to be like, really. I know they want to have their own developments and own characters, but them two, I mean, I love them both, but you've always, when the glass shattered and Stone Cold came out, or when the If You Smell came on, it was always something that you just were so happy to hear. It was like the highlight of the show, no matter what happened. Obviously, there's so much that always happened, but that was the thing that you just remembered from that show that night.
And the great thing is they could have an absolute stinker of a match, which was rare. They could have a stinker of a match, but the one thing that never failed was a Rock or Austin promo. There's elite level promos, and they were the elite.
Well, yeah, they quite literally were, weren't they? I mean, I was watching the Rock's kind of best bits, and obviously some of his best bits came from modern day era, and same with Stone Cold as well, obviously. But the ability he had to it rolled off the tongue with his ability to just speak in third person. And then Stone Cold, you had that into it. It was such fire when you watched it. It was amazing. And then, like you said, then some of the matches could have been a stinker. Sometimes the chemistry just isn't there. Sometimes choreography of the move goes wrong. You never know what happens. Maybe one of them had an injury, but with them two on the mic in the ring, you always knew something was about to happen. Something was about to be so memorable for you. There's a very few handful nowadays in the past, probably in the past year, that you could probably remember. Now, whether that's because of COVID, it doesn't have that crowd effect with you as well.
Yeah.
But I feel like in terms of, The Rock obviously says it very often, but the electricity in the crowd, and you could feel it at home as well. You watch the events, you have to stand up and watch it because it's just, you have to feel like you're there. It's, they were absolutely unbelievable on the mic from the start to the very end, and even now when they come back, you kind of hang to every word because you for a minute you forget it's scripted, you forget it's. I'll never use the word fake, but it's entertainment. You forget that you're lost in that moment, thinking it's actually happening, it's actually real. So it's so unreal how good they were at that, and it's something that so many kind of aspire to be throughout the years, really.
Do you remember the promo that The Rock pulled when he joined the Nation, and he was told that you're given 30 seconds just to make your case, and he literally just comes out, "This is all about respect." He literally just blurts it out like in 30 seconds. This is all about respect. And then I remember, in contrast, the Steve Austin promo when he's going up against the Nation, and he went, This isn't a racial thing. This isn't a white thing. This isn't a black thing. This is a me kicking your ass thing."
It was such a perfect response, wasn't it? It was, the thing is as well, that was actually, I believe that was quite early on into The Rock's career as well.
97.
97,
yeah.
It was. So what, a year in? Do you think, like, to be given such trust like that to kind of hold the show in your own, in the mic, really, to actually make it, and it was such a perfect partner for him to go, this is about me kicking your ass. He didn't give a shit. He wanted to go, shut up, listen to me, but I'll do it properly. You know what I mean? It was, they were the perfect characters to be in those roles at the time, really, and it just carried on through the corporation, and then with Stone Cold just being that anti-establishment figure. It was such a perfect combination of things, and the rivalry just went on for so long, and obviously ultimately kind of culminated in was it WrestleMania 19, I believe, where the Rock finally got one over him on him, kind of
at last.
At last, yeah, that's what I mean. It's in a way, it was kind of the perfect kind of start and end. So it was ultimately the show of respect was there in the end. Obviously, I knew they always had it, but you could see it from a public point of view that God, they really enjoyed working together, no matter what the circumstance was. You see it in interviews now, really, that they credit so many moments, but they've said that that segment there was something that was kind of a turning point for them both. It was something that they loved, and they loved working together, and it was. I feel like it's such a shame that it stopped when it did, because obviously I don't think we'd have ever got tired of watching that kind of rivalry. Obviously, The Rock was poached by Hollywood and ultimately went into unbelievable success, and the injury Stone Cold had throughout his career, ultimately had an amazing career, but was ultimately cut short, which is a shame. But it was always magic when them two were together, whether it was in the ring, whether it was. I mean, the best thing I've ever seen was the Intercontinental belt being thrown into the water. That was incredible.
That was genius, especially because it led to, considering 2 years later, it led to The Rock throwing the Smoking Skull belt.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. It was all so connected. Even like 2 years later, he went, "Oh, remember this," and did it back to him. And then even the same, The Rock threw Stone Cold into the water. It was just every moment made you go, "Oh my God, what's he done there?" It was unheard of at that time, and even now you could do these segments now, and you'd be like, "Oh my God, what is he doing? Why has he done that to him?" Again, it made you think. These people hate each other, and you forget it's all for entertainment. But it wasn't in our eyes. It was like watching a film, but kind of thinking it was real. It was crazy.
Absolutely, and obviously throughout the show there will be quiz questions. I made you aware of this. I made you aware of this off camera.
I'm so terrible.
It should be fine. There is five. There is five.
You'll watch now. I'll get them all wrong, and you'll go, "Are you even a wrestling fan?"
I don't think you'll get them all wrong. But there are 5 questions, and they're only in relation to this feud. There's no other parts to the feud. Like, there's going to build up the questions. So we'll just do any one of your questions. Which one shall I give you first? Yeah, we'll go with this one. Funnily enough, the first time they squared off on pay-per-view was the DX pay-per-view in 1997 to close out the year. The Rock faced Stone Cold for the Intercontinental title. Stone Cold would enter the arena in his truck, and he would deliver a stunner to a member of the Nation on the roof of the truck. Can you name the Nation member that took the stunner?
Oh my god!
And at the time, I'll go through the members for you. I'll go through the members from that time. So obviously a few left. So at the time, it was The Rock, D'Lo Brown, Mark Henry, and Kama Mustafa, the Godfather.
Oh my god! I want to say D'Lo Brown for some reason. I don't know why.
Final answer?
Oh, was it? Go on, go D'Lo Brown. That was my gut instinct.
That is the correct answer.
Was it? Yeah, good. That was my gut instinct. I thought it was. I can't remember him stunnering Mark Henry, and I feel like it'd have been massive if he'd have got the Godfather, and obviously the Rocky faced. So I had to. It was kind of. Actually, it was gut instinct straight away. So I'm glad I went with that.
Yeah, Godfather got flung against the door, and then D'Lo Brown got hit off the windshield, and then he got stunnered on the roof. So 1 out of 5 so far. See, quite one correct, and there'll be another few popping up later on in the show. We're going to fast forward because I wanted to ask you a question before we just discuss for me the rivalry properly kicked off in '98. But what I want to ask you is, because we all talk about the best moments out of this rivalry, but in your opinion, what was the worst moment you saw in this rivalry? If you had to, in your opinion, what would you say was the worst?
Sounding a little bit sentimental, it was kind of the last one, the culmination of it all, the WrestleMania 19. It's kind of you kind of knew it was coming to an end, didn't you? It was like I said before, with Rock going to Hollywood and issues Stone Cold had, it was kind of the end of the era, wasn't it? And the fact that as a fan you knew it was, and knowing that it was almost certainly never going to happen again, certainly in that capacity, it was. As a wrestling fan, you always know things move on and things developing, with new superstars and nowadays with the women getting better and, well, not better, I should say, more airtime. You know things are going to progress and move on. But at that moment in time, you never want to let go of the past. And I think knowing that it was coming to an end, it was kind of having to accept something new was having to come around the corner. And I think as a wrestling fan, it's hard to do that. I think the internet community especially don't like change, and knowing the biggest thing in wrestling was about to end, it was quite hard, I think, for a lot of people, and I hated it. I think that the sign of respect they had between them was the fact that they did that, and it was so out of character for the roles that they had for so many years. It was kind of like, yeah, they broke character a little bit there. It come to an end, and I'd be curious to know what yours was.
My worst moment would have been that, but the other one is I would have to say it's one of the best matches, funnily enough, but it was the end of the Alliance versus WWF match at Survivor Series. Purely because I think that match could have been a little bit better had Kurt Angle not got involved. I know obviously Kurt Angle got involved to build up. He was the mole, and he was the real mole, not Stone Cold, to rejoin them at the end of the pay-per-view. But I just look at that and I think it could have been so much more if they hadn't got involved. I think in a way it kind of ruined it. I know it was part of it was part of the event, but it kind of ruined it for me because it was a great match between those two at the end. They didn't need Kurt Angle's involvement.
Yeah, I mean, WWE are famous for that, though, aren't they? They kind of can, what they think's best for the storyline can sometimes kind of falter it a little bit. And like you say, with Kurt Angle being there, it probably did. I mean, there's so many examples of that, really. But Funnily enough, I watched the ending to that match before, and I have me, look, don't get me wrong, I love Stephanie McMahon. I think she's brilliant. What she's done for wrestling has been insane. But I thought her acting was shocking at the end of that. I kind of think that at that moment, that was probably one of the worst moments in that rivalry, Stephanie McMahon, because I just thought she was really fake. I thought, and so forced and put on. You know when you watch a bad TV show like Hollyoaks, you just think, oh God, you don't believe that. I feel like Stephanie not being in that segment and the wrestlers being quite annoyed by it would have just made that a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I can see where you're coming from with the Kurt Angle thing. I never really thought of it like that before.
It just spoiled it for me, which it could have been so much more, but then again, it's just normal, isn't it? So you just got to run.
I mean, you've got to. I mean, like you say, obviously, in terms of, was it WWF at the time? WWE, I can't remember now. Yeah, it was WWF, wasn't it?
WWF, yeah.
I mean, maybe it's more clear now because obviously with the internet and social media and things, it's quite reported when something goes wrong or when a storyline's been put on. But back then, you just think so many things could have just been done slightly better, I guess, but it just wasn't reported on as much.
Yeah, I agree. Here's a question. Do you think the internet community in a way spoiled the rivalry? Like, once the internet started to fully kick in, because obviously there were like match segments and stuff was leaked. Like, do you think it spoiled it in a way?
No, I don't think it did. I think it was probably, in a way, I actually think the internet and the community coming together was actually a good thing because it brought access to so much more to that, not even just to Rock and Stone Cold. I think it brought so much more access to that era and the era before that and the era before that, because I kind of think it, like we say, we remember it so well in terms of Rock and Stone Cold and how much of a catalyst a pair of them were to the future of WWE and wrestling as a whole. And the fact that it's kind of unlocked everybody to be able to see that, and younger generations and us when we saw it to be able to see it, I think it's a good thing. Obviously, there's some parts of that era that shouldn't have been seen by the younger generations, but I think it's look, the internet community has definitely got its downside, and I think they complain too much, and I think they complain at things that they don't need to be bothered about or complain about. But as a whole, I actually think it's done good for wrestling. I actually think it's done a lot for WWE because I feel like there's a lot of things they probably wouldn't have done had it not been for fans complaining online. You know, the Triple H and things like to complain that they don't listen to them, but they definitely do because ultimately that's where the wrestling fans discuss things with other wrestling fans. You know, and I'm sure they'll look at these forums and think, how could we please our fans? Because the fans are the money maker for the WWE, and if they piss them off, which they've done a lot, by the way, it'll ultimately harm WWE. So the internet's done really well, I think, in terms of WWE, and I don't think it's harmed the Rock and Stone Cold rivalry in any way. Why do you think it has? Do you think it has, or are you playing devil's advocate there?
It was just the manner of just a question, because obviously you know what the internet was like as it started to gradually grow in. It had an effect, so I just thought, well, could have had an effect, but I just wanted to get your opinion on it. I
think it's had more of an effect on today's WWE.
Yeah.
I mean, there's certain wrestlers over the past maybe 10 years that have been wrongly hated and wrongly loved. So the first one that comes to mind now is Cesaro. He's absolutely adored by the internet community, and to an extent, rightly so. He's absolutely amazing in the ring. But I think, as you know, this podcast's all about the Rock and Stone Cold, who had absolutely everything. Now, don't get me wrong, Cesaro is amazing at everything. But I think if you want to propel to that next level where you hold the WWE title and you kind of, I don't want to use Vince McMahon's expression of the brass ring and all that, but to kind of lead WWE, you need to be good on the mic. You need to be able to do these things out in the public events. And Cesaro gets so much praise, but people forget that he's just not that good on the mic, I think, sometimes. And wrongly hated, and I don't know how controversial this is, but one of the greatest ever in WWE, TNA, AEW, anything, is John Cena. It is quite simply John Cena, and he is hated for so many years. He was hated by the IWC, and I get he had a reputation of burying people, but he literally carried the WWE for so long, and I think you can kind of see, you can feel the effects of him not being there anymore sometimes. Falling the crowd attendances are so much lower. The ratings over in America are so much lower, and you could see they picked up when John Cena came back and faced Roman Reigns. Which, by the way, like I was, speaking about the IWC, I actually didn't like Roman Reigns at all in terms of how he was being booked. I thought the talent he had was amazing, but he was being booked so wrong, and now he's being booked so right. And I think now you're seeing the love that you're getting from him. And he's almost like he's not even a heel. He's kind of a mix. You kind of hate, you love to hate his, or you hate to love his attitude at the minute. And his pairing with Paul Heyman and his leader of the faction with the Usos is perfect for him. And
it gives me a rock vibe in the corporation. It gives me a rock vibe in the corporation.
Exactly. And well, that's what I mean. And then you pair that with John Cena's mic skills, and then you put Roman Reigns with Paul Heyman, who has the mic skills of a god, and then you put Roman Reigns, who's clearly improved. And put it this way: if this was 10 years ago, and Roman Reigns was 10 years ago, and John Cena was his character 10 years ago, and Roman Reigns was this current character, that would be up there as one of the greatest rivalries I think we've seen. If it was one of those prolonged rivalries, it wasn't just a few months at a time because John Cena's come back. It'd be something we'd be talking about in 10 years or 20 years, like we are right now with Rock and Stone Cold.
I agree.
Ultimately, the timings of it have just stopped that happening. Because they were incredible together, Roman Reigns and John Cena. But like going back to the IWC, Cesaro's amazing. Roman Reigns is amazing. But if you look at the contrast of how they were viewed online, I think it really affected WWE. And it's where they kind of do have to listen to opinions sometimes. And I think the fact that Roman Reigns did turn heel as he's come back kind of shows they've listened to the internet, because they have to. And sometimes that's a good thing, but sometimes it's not a good thing. And it can sort of cloud the judgment of so many fans out there, I think.
I think it's early stages when we link it back to the main topic, which is the Austin Rock rivalry. The one thing you can link it back to listening to community is, at the time, the internet was only coming into fruition in the late 90s, so it wasn't really an impact, but you still had Dave Meltzer. You still had him every week rating shows. You had that level of community. You still had discussion shows that were produced on telly. You had that. And the one thing you also had was live crowds booing the living daylights out of you. The Rock was, at the time when he was Rocky Maivia, he was praised for, I would say, a couple of months at best. And as soon as WrestleMania 13 happened, he was getting booed because it was constantly the same thing. It was every time I get beat. That's the one thing that I can actually find a real good link to it. The way The Rock was being booked after a match reminds me of a Man United football player's post, which you and me can probably agree on right now, because every time we get beat, it's always the same apologetic cheap shit. So
is it a player or is it a company, Reece?
whoever it is, either way, it still gives me the same vibes. And the minute that changed, it went all the way over. And of course, first guest is Ailey. Good evening. Ailey was on the show last week, and that was a phenomenal show. We discussed the Attitude Era in a way that you wouldn't expect. It was a completely different discussion on the Attitude Era because we actually linked it to modern day failure in wrestling. So that was a fantastic discussion. So Ailey says, "Hey guys, here representing the great one, the people's champion, the millions of the millions, and millions of the Rock's fans." So hello, Ailey. Good to see you. Hope you're well. she's got the right side. We nearly had a falling out last week because I thought she was going to be I thought she was going to say Stone Cold was better than The Rock, and then we would have had a falling out. But then again, this is my.
Okay. Yeah,
100%.
right, I'll agree with you.
I've got a way just to prove my point.
Yeah, well,
that's all that matters.
You can definitely find another picture of the other way around there, Reece. I think.
I'm not. Yeah, it's obvious bias. It's obviously bias. I do have a question for you before I come on to your second of 5 quiz questions. This question is the addition of the corporation as The Rock returned. Obviously, when The Rock won his first world title, at the time he was a babyface. Through the crowd change, the crowd changed him temporarily as a babyface. Steve Austin was still the top babyface at the time. Deadly Game Survivor Series, Stone Cold gets screwed in the semi-finals. Fantastic referee and storytelling shit by Shane McMahon, where he does the false count and then he sticks his fingers up at Steve Austin with a big look of despair, which is a moment to remember. But what was your overall thought of The Rock then going from one faction to the next, which then, because we all know The Rock was being billed to face Steve Austin at WrestleMania, the way it was going to go. But it was a little curveball because obviously Austin versus McMahon was the main rivalry in '98. So what was your overall opinion of The Rock taking the world title in a cheap fashion by obviously the second screw job over Mankind with the sharpshooter to then joining the corporation, which then delayed Steve Austin getting back to the world title by perfect storytelling? What's your overall thoughts on that? Because I thought it was perhaps the best thing he ever did was joining the corporation.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of showed The Rock in a different light, though, didn't it? I think obviously with his babyface run things, I think he kind of obviously you say with Stone Cold being the top babyface in a strange kind of way, really. But I think it kind of showcased The Rock's talents more than anything, because if you think about it, with someone who was so loved like The Rock, he then joined a faction that was so hated, and then thrived on that role, and then made everybody hate him, whilst then everyone loved Stone Cold. It was such perfect storytelling, but you go back to that whole thing where at the time you forget that it kind of isn't real, and you genuinely it made you really, really hate The Rock. And it's something that nowadays it seems so unheard of. You'd never think anyone would be saying that as a fan, but it really did make you hate him. And then I think it kind of showing you how good The Rock really was. It's showing you how good of a babyface he could be. It's showing you how good of a heel he could be. It's showing you how loved he could be, but also how hated he could be. And kind of, I feel like it propelled The Rock to that next level. And you kind of compare it to modern day examples, mainly for younger viewers who probably aren't as familiar with it. But I think it's the one thing where John Cena probably failed on, because he never got that heel run through no fault of his own, of course. Whereas The Rock back then did, and it shows how much better remembered you'll be. I think sometimes that you can play both roles and do them both so well. Because I remember watching it. The thing is watching it as a bit of a younger person, you kind of have to go back and find videos and stuff, but without knowing what was going to happen. So you have to not Google anything, but you have to find the video without knowing the result. You know what I mean? So it was you still have to have that shock factor, and it was really hard to avoid that. And not knowing Rock was going to do that, you almost as a fan, you felt a little bit betrayed by him, because you kind of invested that love for him, that energy into him, and then he just went, "Oh, screw you, I'm going to do this now." And I think you look back at it and you just think, wow, he was so good. It's like you went before, The Rock's probably the go ever. It's things like that probably makes him be the best ever, because him being able to showcase how good he could be on both sides of the story, it just made you hate him and so shocked at him. But in the back of your head, you're like, wow, that was just really good. That it was great acting, it was great storytelling, all whilst doing it as such a good entertainer and a great wrestler. It was the perfect way to sort of describe The Rock, because I feel like he brought elements of that into his modern day rivalries with Cena, because there was on some of their promos, obviously they kind of went back and forth, and I feel like when the crowd started siding with Cena, sometimes you could see that little bit of annoyance in The Rock, And I feel like he brought that energy back from when he was in the corporation to go, the crowd don't like me here. I'm liking it. And you could tell he was feeding off that electricity in the arena. And it was just so perfect. And I genuinely don't think anybody else could have done that. I don't think anyone else.
He transcended it. He transcended it. There's one promo that stands out on. There's one promo for me that stands out between that involves The Rock, and in a way it involves Stone Cold, and it's when the rivalry is when they're not actually physically competing against each other. Singles competition. It's towards the end of '99 before Steve Austin was ruled out injury. Obviously got run over Survivor Series. It was leading up to it. It was the promo where The Rock is literally taking the piss out of Triple H and Stone Cold, and he went Survivor Series 1999, Stone Cold, the Rattlesnake, Triple H, the Game, The Rock, the People's Champion, and you just see him doing it, and then he goes, "Take your little game, roll it back into a box, flip it sideways." It was the way he was doing it. It was like he could come up with any catchphrase. In fact, even sing his own catchphrase. He could literally do it in a way that you would actually, the crowd would spin on it, and it was the way he could get any insult over. I mean, there's one other segment that stands out for me. It's brilliant.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt there, Reece, but
by all means, and you go.
Candy ass. There's not an insult, is it? A jabroni or all that. It's barely an insult, but The Rock says it. You think that is the worst thing you could say to somebody.
I mean, I usually say cockwomble, but jabroni sounds better. But and it is.
You've said that a few times in the chat, to be fair.
Only because I'm speaking the truth about some people, or certain situations. It works well. Another one is: do you remember the segment that led up to the Armageddon Hell in the Cell? And he's taking the mix in who he's got to be, and he's like, "We're got to be Kurt Angle. I'll take a glass of milk, eat some chocolate chip cookies, and take free Viagra." But then he goes about Stone Cold. He puts on a Stone Cold hat, and he's like, "Listen to some Steve Weisers, listen to some Backstreet Boys."
Oh, I watched that before as well, because obviously I knew it was coming on this. I had to click YouTube and just some old clips just to get familiarised again with them. And that came up, and I completely forgot that it existed. And I was watching it, I was like, "Oh God, do you remember this?" I completely forgot about it. So then when I was looking at it before, and I just thought, "When did this happen?" And it just all flooded back to me. Oh, I remember I was laughing my head off. It just had this stupid little hat on. I was just like, Steve Wise, for God's sake.
It just fits it so well, and I just thought that the way he took the piss out of Rikishi in that promo as well, saying, "I did it for The Rock. I did it for the people." Shut up, you thong wearing fatty. Like that's
the best thing he's ever said. That, by the way.
Yeah, thong wearing fatty. Like I think the one thing about it is because there's a relation there, and he knows he can get away with it. I think if you actually look at people who can generally insult people on the mic and actually get away with it, it's Steve Austin and The Rock. Maybe Chris Jericho to an extent. But
yeah,
just The Rock versus Austin, you had that.
Yeah, mentioning Jericho, you'd put him third, I think, in the mic talkers, really. But yeah, it was the way they could do it and the way that they'd get away with it. It was something so unheard of, because I think, sorry, what's this comment? Just reading it.
It's quite a fair comment. I think when he had his rivalry with Cena, him playing his character The Rock seemed a bit forced, because maybe he was Dwayne Johnson for such a long time between his leave and return. That's a fair point. I think
I could see
the promo when he took the piss. The promo when The Rock actually had his entire promo on his arm, and he's pretty much reading from it. And obviously Cena literally in a promo directly went to him, "At least I don't need to write my promo on my arm to get like my words across." And you see that, so I is that channel? I completely get what you mean, like the channel in there. Like, but I think just because at that time he was coming back as a part timer, whereas at that time in '97 to 2003 he was a full timer.
Yeah, you do forget how short actually his run was. Really, it was only about 6-7 years as a full timer. Mm-hmm. And when you compare that to the likes of Randy Orton or John Cena or Triple H or Shawn Michaels or The Undertaker, you do think, wow, that the stardom that The Rock actually achieved and the achievements that he did did get in the WWE for such a small time is such a testament to him. But going back to the insult thing, I think to be fair, the way they did get away with it, I think it kind of shown the backstage relationship they probably had with each other. Because they knew they were so good, they knew the story that they could create, and I think they knew that they could push each other's boundaries because at the end of the day, it was a story, and I think that the worse thing they said, the better it was, and I think they knew that because they knew what it caused the crowd to do. And you can bring Jericho into that, though. Jericho can do things like that because people know that you can get away with it because he's not being serious. He's just trying to create that moment in the ring for the crowd to feed off. But the best at ever doing that was The Rock and Austin because you can forget all the great matches. You could put so many highlight reels of just the promos together because the things that they used to say to each other and to other wrestlers, of course, not just to each other, but they got away with it because people knew how good they were and they knew what would happen if they said it. So they kind of allowed it to happen because they knew the energy that the crowd would get and everyone at home would get and what a memory it would create for so many people. And I think that's why they were so good at it because they knew they were so good at it, so they got away with it.
What was the? I'm gonna give you three. I'm gonna give you three promos, and I want you to try and put them in order. Like it's going to be three promos from Stone Cold and three promos from The Rock, and I want to see what your opinion is from best to worst during their period at their peak during this rivalry. It may contain either of them, it may not. But we'll just give you the one. So the Stone Cold one is the promo when he was going up to the Royal Rumble and he told The Rock that his ass belonged to him and it was the beeper. Obviously, flipped him around, him with the stunner. The second one is Steve Austin's promo on The Rock. Just trying to remember the exact moment. That's it. It was funnily enough the Steve Austin promo before he actually done the milk truck, when he's telling him like he's gonna take the title at WrestleMania. And the third promo is Steve Austin. Don't worry, I'll come to Hollywood Rock very shortly because that's key. The third promo is the night after WrestleMania where Stone Cold was told to stun Vince, even though he just sided with him. So he's basically telling him he doesn't owe them a damn thing. So in order of those three, which one would you put as the best out of those three? I think those are the standout ones for that period.
The best one, I think, was probably before the milk truck, just because of the sheer moment that it had afterwards. That just sticks in my mind just because of how insane that segment was, I think. His second best was probably the night after WrestleMania. It kind of shown his attitude. I just thought, in terms of Stone Cold, kind of not giving a damn, was so perfect, especially when especially against Vince McMahon. Them two were probably his top promos, and then the third one you said as well. Obviously, was look, don't get me wrong, they were all brilliant, but in terms of what they remember to me, I think that was probably the order I'd go in.
Definitely.
About yourself, do you feel do you disagree, or do you feel like it could be a slightly different order, or?
I would just change it a little bit. I would swap your first and second. I would put the title one after the Raw, after WrestleMania, just purely because it completely cemented that heel turn for me. I thought that heel turn was going to be, it was a disaster in the end, but I thought that promo at least gave it a little bit of life. And then say more. Before I give you the Rock promos, I'm just going to read some comments because there's some fantastic comments in the live chat tonight. So Evan's obviously done that. It doesn't matter what you think. Literally one of the best lines ever. Ailey said the catchphrase thing is why I don't like Chris Jericho. Just seems like he was always trying to be The Rock. That's very fair. He did have some similarities.
They did have similarities. I don't think it was a case of being like The Rock, though. I think it's a little unfair. I think everyone's got the similarities to other wrestlers in so many different ways, but Jericho did it in WCW, I believe, and the momentum he carried when he came into the WWE. I think it was, the energy he created in terms of his catchphrases. Every wrestler's got a catchphrase. Doesn't mean they're all trying to like The Rock. Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. So, I mean, yeah, that was a little cringy, if I'm being honest. The Jerichoholic, it didn't quite go. Like, I was a huge fan of Jericho and still am.
It's when they always put overemphasis on the words like never, ever again. Ever say the same again. Jesus Christ.
That's my favourite. I love that when he does that ever, but in that rock star voice. I love that. I think it's brilliant.
I thought that was perfect how he'd done it. Evan says, I think when he had his rivalry was. Oh, we've already done that one. Sorry, my apologies. It's this one. When he was full time, the character's flow was so natural, but from being so toned down on his film career, it was probably hard to get back into character. It's a good point, actually, because
Yeah, I'd
obviously you
agree
got to
with
play a
that.
different way.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the boundaries that they had to push. If you remember, obviously the things that they had to push in the Attitude Era, it was never going to fly when he came back. So he did have to tone down his character, probably quite a bit, to be completely honest. But look, it was never going to be the same when he came back in terms of what he was between '97 and 2003.
Yeah,
but it was still amazing when he came back, I think, and even so, in terms of the PG era, he did push the boundaries of that quite a bit as well. I feel so. It wasn't
that the promo on the New Day, the promo on the New Day when he said when you wear llama penises on your head, like in the PG era, he shouldn't be getting away with that, but he does because you heard the roar of the crowd. Like he just gets away with it, and like I remember the one promo. I don't know if you can remember. It's the promo when he takes the mick out of Lana and Rusev, and he literally just goes up your Putin. Like,
yeah. See, I love them too. I thought they were brilliant. I thought they worked really well together. The one that sticks in my mind is the Rock concert with Vicky Guerrero, where he sings a different version of "Wonderful Tonight" by Eric Clapton. I thought when yes, they actually look horrible tonight. Just thought that was it because no one expected that either as well. It was like wow. It's not even that bad when you genuinely think of it in the grand scheme of things, especially considering what they got away with 20 years ago.
It's just the way he done it as well. It's just the way he done that song. He's just saying, "You look so nice." He's just complimenting her, and then he literally goes, and then I said, "Biatch, you look horrible tonight." And then the way he called her a hooker. Not even expensive kind. A cheap hooker.
Do you know what I felt? I remember that night because I felt quite a lot for Cena that night because Cena brought back a character that was loved, the Doctor of Thugonomics, and I still personally think that was better than the Rock concert. But
easy.
Yeah, it was better. It just was, but because Cena did the start of the show and the Rock did the end of the show, everyone remembers the Rock a lot more, and it made me feel a little bit for Cena.
That was the best one, the original Rock concert in Sacramento. Not the second one when he's not the second one when he was praised second, but the first one when he took the piss out of them saying like the Lakers coming back. That Hollywood Rock, funnily enough, that Hollywood Rock era had one rock concert about Steve Austin, and he's just ripping into about how he's going to beat him at WrestleMania. And he's taking the mic saying like, hey, you're not coming in, you're not coming in. Obviously, you got the Hurricane at the time as a side feud, and he's like, hey, it's nothing. He says he knows you. Like, it's just like, I think the work of The Rock in terms of in-ring work, 99 to 2001. Like, 2002 was a decent year until SummerSlam, his last match when he went over to Lesnar, like, was quite good as a main run, but 99 to 2001 for me was his absolute best. Bar the Hulk Hogan and Lesnar match in 2002, maybe the Taker match at No Way Out, but the Hollywood Rock work on the mic, that for me, this is maybe a bit unpopular opinion, Hollywood Rock was better on the mic than Steve Austin was in 98, 99.
Do you know what? I think some people probably would disagree with you there. I don't think it's as controversial as you'd probably make out, though. The thing is with that is, I think Stone Cold was so good on the mic, though, sometimes it'd be hard to make that comparison. I think that's why people will probably take the controversy more from it, because Stone Cold was so good throughout his entire run, and 98 was it 98, 99 Stone Cold that you compared it to? I don't
Purely
think
because it's
much
peak.
better than that.
I think it's just peak of mic work versus the way The Rock reinvented himself in that Hollywood persona. It was just something different you wouldn't expect. Especially, like, obviously, side opinions, obviously, when he's taking the mick at Hulk Hogan and he's like, "What you gonna do?" And he's like, he's taking the proper piss at him. I think it's just that sort of mic work. That mic work really took it to a different level. And Stone Cold was at that bar. I'm not going to deny that, but I just thought Hollywood Rock mic work was just that was unmatched.
Yeah, I think again though, who would have got away with?
Yeah,
that's true. Again though, who would have got away with doing that to Hulk Hogan? Do you know what I mean? We go back to what we said before about the boundaries and things. Hulk Hogan knew that The Rock could get away with that because he knew how unbelievable that would be for everyone watching. And I think he was happy to let The Rock push them boundaries to him because I find it quite hard to even think anyone who pushed Hulk Hogan to that point ever, even during the Hulkster's go when he was kind of the number one.
I don't
other
think
than maybe Macho Man, maybe Roddy Piper, but I don't think The Rock probably pushed him as far as anyone else has ever done.
It was great as well, especially that WrestleMania match, which we will be doing later on a different show. Actually, if you want to appear on, I'm going to have a wide variety of guests on that show. It's going to be greatest WrestleMania matches. That is
I would love to be on that.
That is by far one of them. So there's a spoiler for a future episode. I just need to decide when we're going to do it. Could do it as a build up to WrestleMania. Who knows? But I'm going to give you two questions now. Your two quiz questions, and then we're going to discuss the first of the three WrestleMania. So that WrestleMania 15 match. We're going to talk about it. But obviously, right now it's time for your second quiz question. Live chat as well. Get involved as well if you want to. Okay, so we did the D'Lo Brown one, so that's ticked. Question for you. Backlash 99, Rock faced Stone Cold in a rematch from that first WrestleMania. Who was the referee in the match at Backlash?
Wasn't it Mick Foley?
That is incorrect. I'll give you one other guess.
I thought I saw on the phone, Mick Foley.
WrestleMania he was. Live chat as well. If you want to get involved, drop some answers in. I'll let you know. I'll let you know who's got the correct answer.
Oh my god! It's like it's in the back of my head and I can't push it to the front. Was it Shane McMahon?
Correct.
Yeah, there you go.
It was Shane McMahon. Shane McMahon wrestled. Shane McMahon actually refereed two back-to-back world title matches. The Backlash main event and Over the Edge, Taker versus Steve Austin. So that was, But the WrestleMania main event at WrestleMania 15 was originally supposed to be Mankind, but he got taken out by Big Show. It then went to Vince, who thought he could do the business, which then Shawn Michaels overruled as commissioner. Mike Chioda then refereed. He got injured by storytelling, and then Mankind would finish the match as referee at WrestleMania. Speaking of WrestleMania, the very first encounter, WrestleMania 15. What is your overall? Obviously, the match for me was absolutely excellent. That to me is, I think each one, funnily enough, 15, 17, and 19 for me were all 5-star. But I always say WrestleMania 17 is the greatest of the three. But the one with so much energy and so much storytelling to build the great feud at the time was WrestleMania 15. The way that they went in going into that. The Rock is the top heel champion. He's got the entire corporation behind him. Steve Austin, he's there to regain the title that he was screwed out of. What was your overall thoughts on that first match between them at WrestleMania 15?
Well, in terms of the rivalry, I think it goes so much bigger than just speaking about how The Rock was the top heel. I think it was kind of the perfect start to the 3 WrestleMania matches that they had, and it's kind of that the old storytelling of you always want the good guy to come out on top. So in terms of Stone Cold doing that, it was kind of the perfect way to start something that we didn't know at the time was going to be so special. With the match being so good, I agree. Actually, I think the WrestleMania 17 match was the best one, but that's like saying it's no mean feat to say that was the best one because the other 2 were still so good.
Yeah,
and in terms of Stone Cold, it was a perfect way to finish that story in terms of Stone Cold overcoming everything and then winning it at the end because you knew he was screwed out of it, and you were constantly. It was similar to like Daniel Bryan when it happened a few years ago. You were so happy that the good guy came out on top, and with the attitude and the kind of charisma that Stone Cold had, it was so perfect. It was kind of I don't know how to put it because obviously it was a story, but you sometimes feel bad for The Rock because he played his role as a heel so perfectly, and for him to come out as the loser, you sometimes think, I wonder what could have been if it was different and the other way around happened.
yeah.
What would have the crowd reaction been? What would have, like, if you flip it to nowadays, what would the internet reaction have been if the heel winning? It was just such a perfect start to what was going to be so good, and the fact that they managed to do it together and Stone Cold came out on top of it. In hindsight, we'll pack it in now and think how amazing it was. I mean, I definitely agree with you. I think the second one was definitely better, but not because in terms of quality. I just think it was because of the chemistry they've gained together over the years. It was just so perfect, I think. Yeah, I feel like it was just such a good match, and it was such a great way to start a really good sort of rivalry that we knew was going to be so good against 2 of the best talkers that we've ever had.
Yeah.
And two of the best wrestlers we've ever had. And the in-ring competitors that so many of us aspired to be over the years, and the fact that we had such a great start to something so special, and it ended up being something that kind of carried on for a little bit, and then ultimately other things happened as well, where you could see other rivalries that they had, and obviously then culminating into WrestleMania 17 was brilliant. I did wonder where he went then, Reece.
Brother opening the door wanted to show me his Nintendo Switch. So fair play. I do have sweets, but not with me. And Trevor, later than usual, unacceptable performance, unacceptable. I'll give you a people's elbow when I see you. Good evening, mate. Hope you're doing good. I completely agree with you on those aspects there in terms of like chemistry. 2001 was far better than 99 as a match, but the way it just built from 99, it just has so much an effect, especially because not only are you getting this match once, not only are you getting this match twice, but you got this match 3 times at WrestleMania, and each one's build up just got even better and better. They could have had, like, the first match was built up over a year, slowly in the making. The second was built up from the Royal Rumble, when obviously it led to Stone Cold winning it to then get back to WrestleMania after getting injured. And then obviously The Rock would win his 6th world title against Kurt Angle No Way Out, which would then lead to the WrestleMania return match. And then the last one was built up purely because The Rock didn't win the Battle Royal, and he was annoyed that Steve Austin was named Superstar of the Decade. Like, it had you could build it up. You didn't need a lot to build these 2 up because they were that good. They could build something out of nothing.
Yeah, there you go. You explained that perfectly. They could build up something out of barely anything. I think the first one where there was a genuine story told in terms of the corporation and everything. Second one was obviously a world title and the Royal Rumble, which ironically is one of my favourite moments between the two, with the Royal Rumble ending. I think I don't know if it's come across controversial, but I think the third one was probably more created in terms of nostalgia. I think maybe WWE, maybe the pair of them thought this was going to be the last time they faced each other, and I feel like there was probably quick. We need to find a reason to get these two in the ring one more time, because obviously with The Rock going off to Hollywood, the twilight zone of Stone Cold's career was hitting, and obviously we know with Stone Cold him leaving not so long after with the Brock Lesnar situation and things, but it was kind of
spot on.
I think it was more of a nostalgic reason.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
nostalgia.
Spot on. Yeah, definitely. But Trevor's spot on there, I think. But yeah, the nostalgic reason of getting two of the greatest of their era, possibly ever, to go one last time, because it was obvious The Rock was going to Hollywood. It was a huge blow for the WWE at the time. They were having to find a quick turn on somebody replacing The Rock in terms of who was going to be at the top, because they were losing such a huge asset, and it wasn't through any fault of their own. It was just The Rock, for whatever reason, thought it was time to move on, do other projects. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but I think the WWE kind of had to sort of bring in a nostalgic reason, and also to kind of cash in on something that was coming to an end. And I think it would have been silly of them not to, because they had to. Yeah, and again, the match was a good match. There was nothing wrong with it. There was no issues with it. It was just it was the end of an era, and they knew it. And it had to bill it as that almost in some kind of weird way.
Thankfully, that was the main event of WrestleMania. Thankfully, that was the WrestleMania main event for Raw, and not the burial of Booker T. That was a travesty. Thank God that was the absolute best. Here's a fair comment. Ailey, when you compare Rock versus Austin having 3 big blow-off matches to Roman Reigns versus Lesnar about to have their 8th, is mind-blowing. Exactly. They're just... Yeah. That's what they are literally using Roman versus Lesnar as a way of... This is the modern version of that match. I'll never capture that feel. As good as those two are, they'll never have that feel.
It never will. And the thing is, I'd kind of in terms of the Roman Reigns and Lesnar thing, I'd half discount the first five matches, however many they've had. You know, where Reigns played that, I'm going to overcome everything. The next one that they do, eventually, when it comes to it, with Reigns, Heyman, and Lesnar in the character that Reigns is now, that will be remembered, I think. Obviously not in the same way as Rock and Stone Cold, but Roman's current character will be remembered, I think, as Roman Reigns, that we all actually do like. And I think, and Lesnar currently is, I didn't actually realise, but Lesnar's very good on the mic. He's really good. And
he gets a lot of stick for that.
Yeah, he gets, I mean, he does get a lot of stick for it, but I think a lot of people need to give the guy credit for how good he actually is.
Trevor, the only good thing Kamala did was... That was it. Very real. I remember Lesnar's first reign. Yeah, he had slips in these conversations. I remember Lesnar's first reign, and I was blessed with that. When Lesnar first made his debut, I just turned 5 years old, funnily enough. I just turned 5 when Lesnar debuted. That was back in 2002. His first reign, he was solid in the ring. He was actually good in the mic. But what he didn't need the mic. Let Heyman do the talking. Let Heyman build him up as a monster heel. Even when he was a babyface, he was decent on the mic. He didn't really have to do much because the heel was doing the talking. He did his talking by smashing him in the ring. At the time when he was actually doing matches, not suplex, F5, suplex. It was a proper match.
Yeah,
back then.
This is what I mean. You forget. I think a lot of people, especially the younger fans now, forget Lesnar's wrestling ability, because all you do see nowadays, and it's quite frustrating, because I'm a big fan of Lesnar, but it is quite frustrating to see him do 10, 20 suplexes, a quick F5, and then the match is over. Because I think from remembering his first reign when he was here between 2002 and 2004, the guy was unreal. He was an athletic monster. He was so good in the ring, and it's such a shame that so many people don't know about that because of his current run. Whether that's the way he's booked, whether it's the way Lesnar wants to be, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it is a big shame for so many fans missing out on something that so many people know Lesnar can be.
He would never have made it if it hadn't been for The Rock saying, I'll lose the title to him at SummerSlam. The Rock went to creative and went, make him king of the ring, and I'll lose to him at SummerSlam. People thought The Rock was doing it just so Lesnar can get over. Like The Rock handpicked as the guy who was going to take the title off him when he won the title of Vengeance. This was pre-planned. Like The Rock returned a week before that King of the Ring, and then afterwards he literally went and said, "If you want to build something now, you have to go with Lesnar. Give me the title. I'll give it like one last run as a champion. I'll put him over. I will make this guy your legitimate champion if you give him to me at SummerSlam. If it had been anybody else, Lesnar would have failed."
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that's quite controversial. I don't know if they'd have failed. I get what you're trying to say. I know Rock. The fact that Rock kind of handpicked Lesnar and said, "Look, if you want to replace me, then you pick him because that's how good I think Lesnar is." And it's huge testament to Brock Lesnar to have someone like The Rock go, I want him to be the next guy.
I remember watching that SummerSlam. I know who won. It was a straight, clean finish. It was a brilliant finish as well. Fantastic people's elbow counter, fantastic rock bottom counter. Like, it was a solid match. But I just look at who he had to go up against at that period. Rob Van Dam to legitimize a heel? No. Squashing Hulk Hogan? That's a good step. But dismantling at the time the biggest guy in the business? The Rock just took him.
I mean, even at the time, I mean, The Rock was a freaking megastar, and he kind of carried WWE for a little bit, I think. And this is what I said. Go back to what I said before. It's such a testament to Brock Lesnar, the fact that The Rock picked him and said, "Look, he will be the next big thing. Pick him, give him the title after me." And I think I saw a comment before about Lesnar being too real for wrestling. I do wonder what made Lesnar not want a longer run, because I'm a little unsure of what happened, to be brutally honest. So forgive me ignorance, but it is a shame we didn't see Lesnar do 8, 9, 10 years, because
I think he could have done.
Curious to see. I think he could have done. I think obviously he's finished with Goldberg in terms of 2004. It was pretty tragic. So it would have been nice to see what Lesnar genuinely could have done with it, a prolonged run. A prolonged full-time run, I should say.
That's right. He hated the travel. It's on the Ruthless. It's on the Ruthless Aggression series, and also evening to Andrew as well. And it's all right. Better late than never. At least you're here. There is no late unless you're me late, which is totally different. Wesley Lesnar came back. He was too UFC for my liking. It seemed like he missed the memo of performing. It was the one promo he was built as legitimate. He was built to bring legitimacy back. That's what it was, and it says it all, really. I mean, and I completely agree.
No, he is right. He was too UFC. I think that's the point of him.
Yeah, I agree. And this comment literally just sums up for me. The Rock transcended the sport. No matter what he ended up doing, he would be at the top of the game, even tiddlywinks.
Yeah,
literally.
The Rock did.
And that's all because of Stone Cold. Stone Cold took a chance on him as well.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the whole point of this podcast, it is weird, isn't it? Because everybody nowadays you speak to knows wrestling because of The Rock. It's weird because wrestling fans will think of Hulk Hogan maybe, or Andre the Giant. Neutrals who don't really watch wrestling, don't know anything about it, know wrestling because of The Rock. They know the WWE because of The Rock. That business is a worldwide company, brand, business, multi-billion-dollar corporation.
Yeah.
Arguably because of The Rock. and then you can throw in Stone Cold's rivalry with The Rock, which is what transcended it through the Attitude Era, and argue that them two are on level playing field of being why WWE is what it is today.
I like that comment there, which something I would gladly respond to. Most famous wrestler list would be very interesting. Rock and Steve Austin are in. I'm actually going to give you a top 10, and we'll see if you agree, and we'll see if Andrew agrees or disagrees. So The Rock 1, Hulk Hogan 2. I would maybe flip it. I would say I think Hogan probably has to be at the top. I think literally for what he did when he first got a first world title reign, it was just hard to not know who Hulk Hogan was. I would say Hulk Hogan, Steve Austin, The Rock in third. Even though I'm a massive Rock fan, I would say Steve Austin is more there than him. Fourth, I'd say The Undertaker. Then I'd say Andre the Giant in fifth. I'd say
Is this
Bret
in
Hart.
terms of greatest wrestlers, or like how are we doing this, Reece?
I'm doing it in terms of most famous.
Okay, right.
So for me, 100%, I would say Hogan, Austin, The Rock, Taker, Giant, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, Kurt Angle, Roddy Piper, and Sting. In fact, no, sorry, Ric Flair. Sting just outside top 10.
If we're doing it in terms of top 10, I disagreed with quite a few of them, and I think you need to throw in a couple of so-called modern ones. So I think I probably agree with you. I'd probably go Hulk Hogan number 1 because of his outside interests from wrestling. Like his reality TV in the noise. I think a lot of people well outside of wrestling, like on MTV, was on a lot. I think a lot of people outside of that who never watched wrestling knew that.
Probably fair comment, Andrew. Probably fair comment. Yeah.
I think Ric Flair should be a lot higher. Yeah.
Of course, I'm.
And this was where I was getting to this, Evan.
I like to cause a spin on things. That's what I do best.
Yeah, I think you're probably right in terms of Hogan. I think Rock's probably 2. I think Stone Cold's probably 3. I think Ric Flair's probably 4th. I think 5th is probably Andre the Giant. I think 6th is John Cena. I think 7th is Macho Man. I think 8th Ultimate Warrior.
Great shout.
9 Sting. I'd go with, and 10. Oh, I didn't say The Undertaker in that list, did I?
I don't think you did.
Sting. I'd take out Sting. I'd put The Undertaker 9th, and I'd put 10th Triple H. If we were going to go just outside, I'd go 11th Shawn Michaels, 12th Sting. I think Triple H makes the top 10 over Shawn Michaels because of what he's doing now.
Quite possibly, yeah.
I think it's just transcended it, and that's not through any fault of Shawn Michaels. Triple H married Stephanie McMahon, so it kind of it's just the way it happened, I guess. But I think
that's fair. I think that's very fair. There is actually a fair list in here. Trevor's obviously Trevor with a bizarre one. He's went Ultimate Warrior, Macho Man. He's agreed with me, and then he's went and said Doink the Clown. You bloody nugget! You bloody nugget! But then Andrew's actually done his own list. So in order by the looks of it, from left to right, he's went Rock, Hogan, Austin, Andre, Piper, Savage, Taker, Warrior, Bret, John Cena. About 8 or 9 of those match your list. The only one that you didn't mention was I think Bret Hart, maybe Andre the Giant, I think. But
yeah, I think Bret Hart would have been top 15, top 20, definitely.
Yeah,
because I think what you've got to remember though, Reece, is ultimately wrestling is worldwide, but I don't think it's mainstream in quite a few places. If you think about it over in the UK, it's not reported on as a sport anywhere like it is in the US. Mainstream is probably the wrong word because it is very well loved, but I don't think it's.
Don't worry, Taker is definitely top 5. Here's a good question. Where does Kane rank on this list?
Kane.
Forget forget the crappy Isaac Yankum and all that rubbish. Where does that Kane run, especially from the original onwards? Where does he rank in this list? I think you would have to say maybe top 15 as well.
Yeah, you'd probably put him there. Well, I'd probably put him after Bret Hart, I think. I probably put him 14th. I put Bret Hart 13th and Kane 14th. 15th, I'd have gone Randy Orton just because of how his longevity in the sport. But yeah, it's like that comment said. It's just not that mainstream. So when you talk as wrestlers in famous terms, you have to. I'd have to mention their names to somebody who's never even watched wrestling in their life.
Yeah.
If they know the name, they're famous.
Yeah.
It's like over here, football is mental. You could say anybody's name, probably in the Premier League, especially a Man United player, and they'd know who it was even if they'd never watched a football game in their life.
Yeah.
Wrestling's a little bit different. It's a little bit more niche, I think. And if you were to mention John Cena and The Rock and Hulk Hogan and Stone Cold, everybody knows who they are. Everyone. Because of everything they've achieved. This is what I mean. These people are famous more so, probably because of things outside of wrestling. And what I mean by that is The Rock is very famous, of course, for his wrestling, but he's worldwide known because of his films. John Cena, Eddie Guerrero is my favourite ever. Like, absolutely heartbroken.
Phenomenal.
But John Cena's more known, I think, to a wider world because of his "You Can't See Me" meme. To people that never watch wrestling, a lot of it's ridiculous as two fans speak about it. It is silly, but a lot of people probably know John Cena because of that radio phone call prank a few years ago.
Yeah.
If you remember,
which is still to this day one of the funniest things on YouTube.
It's amazing, but most people probably know him because of that, and most people know Hulk Hogan because of his reality TV shows and his daughter Brooke. It's things like that. We know
and Thunderlips.
And Thunderlips, yeah, exactly. So, in terms of wrestling, even to a neutral wrestling fan who dives in and out of it, they know him. But to someone like, if I was to say to my granddad who'd never watched wrestling in his life, he'd know who The Rock is.
Yeah, easy.
This is what I mean. So it's very true.
Well, that's a good point. He was also in an episode of Walker, Texas Ranger with Sting. Hulk Hogan. They were both in the same episode. Coincidentally, Sting played the bad guy.
I tell you who we've not included in the list as well, Reece, if we could. Mainly for very, very modern day, The Big Show. He had a Netflix series. He was in The Waterboy as Captain Insano.
That was great.
The Big Show, it was brilliant, that. But the Big Show's a lot more famous, I think, and his sheer size as well. Everyone's heard of The Big Show. I think he's a lot more famous than a lot of people made out. Big Show was huge in so many ways, in terms of his acting, in terms of, I think The Waterboy probably made him go, his sort of star power go up.
He was just
Twitter, yeah.
Iron Sheik is just so bloody great. To be fair, I wouldn't say that maybe mainstream media let him down, but another one that maybe mainstream media let down was Sergeant Slaughter, especially when he declared himself a soldier of the of Iraq and everything. When he done that amazing heel turn when he submitted himself to Iraq under General Adnan and he beat Warrior for the title. I think if mainstream media hadn't let him down at that time, compared to what Hulk Hogan was getting, Slaughter would have been even better as an enemy to the United States. He was huge, but as it was coming into that period in the 90s, it was just a little bit slow. There was just something about him. I absolutely adored Slaughter.
Yeah,
not that because he follows me on Twitter. It's just because he's just an absolute genius.
Does it? Oh, that's a nice little plug for you, a little name drop, wasn't it?
Yes.
You know what? Going back to these famous lists, it's actually it's a good little debate that. But one of my other favourites, and to be fair, still is because he's actually returned. But with CM Punk, I absolutely adored the guy and still do. And I think his little, dare I say it, not very good run in the UFC, still much better than many people's, if I may add, so fair play to him.
Very true.
But CM Punk probably, his star power went quite high in terms of he went out of wrestling. He went into the MMA world. He spoke very openly about how helpful Brock Lesnar was as well when he went into it as well. So
yeah,
this is what I mean when you talk about most famous. There's so many variables you can even bring into it to make them to wonder why they're the most famous. Because really, you could even nowadays, if you were to speak about it, to a six. There's nothing wrong with Dan James.
I can comfortably say Daniel James is blocked on Twitter by me. He's blocked because I just don't like him. I just don't like him. Every single freaking show I'm on is always. You're gonna see this when I join you again on AFU when we're on again. That's gonna happen again everywhere I go.
Aye, well, this is what I mean. Going back to that, like if you spoke to someone like very modern, very new to it, you'd be looking at that. Probably wouldn't even mention Hulk Hogan in the past. If you spoke to a 15-year-old now, and you asked who's their most famous, John Cena would probably be top of every one of their lists. Then I mean, of course, The Rock would be in the top 3, but you'd forget.
That's a good point.
I don't feel like Lesnar did either, and Lesnar happily left when he didn't get what he wanted as well, and obviously the travel restrictions, like you said before. But I feel like Lesnar was very, very real in terms of any unfairness that he felt. Others may disagree, but he felt that was unfair to him as well.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, and we've got to discuss your final quiz questions.
Oh God, yeah, I forgot about that. Go on, last one then.
Last one. Yeah. Which pay-per-view in the UK did The Rock and Steve Austin square off against each other? Which UK pay-per-view?
Wasn't SummerSlam, was it? No. UK pay-per-view. Trying to think which one was in the UK now. Is it Backlash?
Nope.
Oh, wow, Reece, I really don't think I know this one.
And I can also tell you, Andrew, that is incorrect as well.
Bad Blood?
Nope. I'll give you one last guess.
Give me a clue.
Okay. I'll give you a clue. Insurrection, One Night Only, Rebellion. So I've literally,
the name of it.
I've just named one of the pay-per-views for you as a clue. I've just named it.
Was it Rebellion? I can't remember, mate. Is that what it was? Rebellion? I couldn't remember the name of it.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that was in the UK. That.
Mm-hmm.
God, I didn't know that. Fair enough. Bloody hell, I've learned something there.
Yeah, good old pay-per-view in the UK, Rebellion.
I'd love to see them do that again. I can't see them doing it anytime soon, but obviously with SummerSlam at Wembley all those years ago, and that one as well that I didn't even know about, it'd be amazing if they did something like that again. Because the capacity is here to do it, and the demand is definitely here to do it. And I think with ticket sales over in America at the minute not being great from what I'm seeing in terms of Raw shows, I think the demand for doing it in the UK or Australia or of course Saudi Arabia where it's been a few times, I think doing a pay-per-view like that would be massive for the WWE, I think.
I would happily go to a WrestleMania if it came here. And
Definitely.
of course, one last thing as we wrap up the show. One last thing. What is the standout moment for you in that rivalry? The standout moment.
Well, I mentioned before, obviously the Royal Rumble moment where Stone Cold thought he'd won, didn't win, and then just went off on you and throw you out anyway. I think that was my favourite moment, but I think the standout moment was the show of respect in the last one. I think like I said before, you could tell it was over. You could tell it was the rivalry was done. They were moving on to new things. It was time for the next era of wrestling to start, and the fact that you could see. That'd be good. I'd love to meet Eugene. That'd be well good. I thought he was brilliant with Triple H in 2004. But yeah, I think the culmination of it was probably me saddest but most memorable moment because it was kind of a nice little way to finish it.
I agree to that comment. I agree to that.
Curious to know your standout moment, Reece.
The WrestleMania handshake.
Yeah, there you go. Fair enough. Yeah, I'd agree. That's what I mean. It was such a good rivalry and such a memorable one, and I think the ending of it was kind of the most fitting way to end it.
Mm-hmm. And as we come to the end of the show, just want to ask Callum, where can we find you on the socials?
You can find me right there on Twitter, at __ Callum Stone on Twitter. Follow me on there. I'll follow you back if I see that you follow me. You can see me, of course, on All for United channel every now and then when I show up. And you can actually read my Manchester United blog, theunitedroad.com. There's a link on my Twitter for that as well. So if you follow me on Twitter, you will see it on there. Give them a read. Some of them are quite funny. Some of them are quite serious, depending on which article you read. Some of them are a bit of a laugh. Some of them are a little bit upsetting, especially when Solskjaer got sacked. But yeah, give me a follow. Give that a follow. Let me know what you think of it. And I hope you all enjoyed the show as well, guys.
Yeah. Thanks very much, guys, for tuning in. And Callum, it's been a pleasure having you on.
Absolute pleasure being on. Love to come back, mate. Absolutely.
You will be invited very soon. I can promise that. And
Fair play. Fair play.
I'm going to sign off with that. Have a great one, guys. See you later.
Fair play, Evan. Goodbye.